And welcome to a new edition of Reigns on the Cardinals podcast here on STLSportsPage.com. Rob Reigns, Mike Reigns coming to you from our studio here in the STL Sports Page studio. Mike, another kind of quiet week for the Cardinals. A little bit of news, not headline-grabbing news really, but a couple things to talk about. And I guess the way this winter has gone, we'll take any kind of news we can get.
We'll take any news we can get, right? Aren't we all holding out to see if we sign Juan Soto, right? Isn't that what we're all waiting for?
Pins and needles, yes. But no, don't count that heavy. But I think two things. One is that obviously even if the Cardinals are not a player in the major free agent market, and we know they won't be from what they've said about their plans for the winter, that does kind of set the tone for the meetings. And there are some negotiations going on between the major free agents and teams. And if anybody wants to sign a smaller free agent or wants to trade for a player, you kind of have to know where you stand on how much money you have left in the budget to be able to do those things.
And as we've discussed many times on this show in the past, the revenue and the money this year is really going to drive these free agent signings. A lot of teams are worried about spending all that money with not really knowing what the TV deals are going to look like. And, MLB is trying to remove blackouts for MLB.TV, and there's a whole bunch of moving parts that is really slowing this whole thing down. And Juan Soto is a big piece of that.
We want to, of course, thank our sponsors, Archwell Health, Drury Hotels, AAA Travel of Missouri, sponsor this podcast, as well as all of our content on STLSportsPage.com, keeping it free to all of our readers. The Cardinals, like all major league teams, had to set their 40-man roster this week. They did that, added 4 players to the roster. I don't think there were really any major surprises with that group. We all knew that Tink Hansen, Tekoa Roby, 2 of their top pitching prospects, would be added to that group. And then they added 2 other guys, outfielder Matt Koperniak, who had a really good season at AAA, depth move, and then as well as another pitcher, Matt Swanson, who was at AA Springfield as their closer most of the season, then pitched in the Arizona Fall League. So those were the 4 that they added. Did outright Drew Rom off the 40-man roster. He's still on the Memphis roster. He was not claimed on waivers by anybody after missing all of 2024 with the shoulder injury. So that leaves the 40-man roster at 39. Still some possibility of some further moves. The other deadline coming up on Friday is what they call the non-tender deadline, which is basically for arbitration-eligible players, whether the Cardinals would have anybody that they would not want to offer a contract to for next year. If they did it a couple of players last year, Juan Yepez and Jake Woodford, it fell into that category, and they did not offer them a contract. But the 6 players that the Cardinals have eligible for arbitration this year, I think 5 of them are no-brainers as far as getting a contract offer, and that's, of course, Ryan Helsley, JoJo Romero, Lars Nootbaar, Brendan Donovan, and Andre Palante. I would be stunned if any of those 5 did not get a contract offer, leaving the only possibility, I think, left-handed reliever John King would be a possibility of not getting a non-tender. That's really the only one to watch.
Yeah, for sure. And, really happy to see Koperniak added to the 40-man. I think a lot of people, I don't want to say surprised, but he was probably the one guy that you didn't think would make it. And if you want to overanalyze and read into it, you're adding an outfielder. So does that mean they're making room for other guys to be moved or other guys to come in? So that's, always if you play the overanalyze game, right? But yes, when you look at the 5, non-tender options, all of those guys are going to get a deal. The question just becomes John King. But as we've talked about, your bullpen is a big question mark, right? Because the back end of that bullpen, Ryan Helsley.
Yeah, and he's, of course, one of the main trade rumors that you hear. And again, he's kind of, right as we talked about off the top of the show, he's the guy that even though a lot of clubs probably have an interest in him from a trade standpoint, they're not going to want to pull the trigger on a move like that until they know what's happened on the free agent market. A club might be trying to negotiate with Corbin Burns or Max Fried or Blake Snell or one of the other top free agent pitchers. Well, if they get them, then maybe they don't. They cap out their budget and they don't have room for a guy like Helsley. So everything's kind of still going to be on hold. The one thing, getting back to the 40-man roster that I should have mentioned before I jumped ahead to the non-tender deadline, everybody then who was not protected, I think there's 5 guys left in the organization who needed to be protected and weren't. That makes them eligible for the Rule 5 draft at the winter meetings in December. 2 guys I think you could look for that have a possibility of getting claimed by another club, both pitchers, Andre Granillo, who is a hard-throwing right-handed relief pitcher, and Ian Bedell, the former Mizzou pitcher who split the AA and AAA season in 2024. Those are guys that I think some clubs might take a look at. The Cardinals had some other probably better prospects from a pitching standpoint that they didn't protect, but they're also farther down in the system, and knowing their club would have to protect a guy and take him on the full active roster for the full season probably will keep those guys safe, even though they're eligible to be drafted.
And the Rule 5 is always kind of a tough draft, right? Because like you had just mentioned, anyone that is selected in whatever round it may be, has to stay on the roster for the entire active season. So if you select somebody in the major league portion, they have to be on your major league roster for the entire season. And so that kind of holds some, limitations back for some of these guys to make moves. So, I think it allows you to save guys that you don't necessarily have to protect farther down because they don't want to necessarily bump them up. Because let's say you're drafting someone from AA, that means they have to be on the AAA roster the entire time. So if they're ready to make that move, great, but that allows them some freedom.
But the case in point, the case study to show that, a Rule 5 pick could be a good pickup is Ryan Fernandez, the guy the Cardinals got in the Rule 5 draft last year. I think when they made that move, everybody went, okay, so what, but then he ended up, having a good spring, made the club, and then increasingly got more responsibility and higher leverage roles as the season. And I think as you project the Cardinals 2025 bullpen right now, he's the guy that you're going to be counting on to be a key role.
He's been a great addition for sure. So the Rule 5 draft can certainly play a big portion of how this shapes the team as well.
The other, of course, major news in baseball that's going on this week, it's awards week. All of the Baseball Writers Association of America awards for the Manager of the Year, the MVPs, Cy Young Award, Rookie of the Year going on. We've had all of the announcements so far except for the MVPs. They'll be coming up on Thursday night. I don't think any real surprises. I did kind of think that Jackson Merrill might have more of a chance to beat out Paul Skeens for the NL Rookie of the Year, but really wasn't very close.
It really wasn't close at all. And I think the thing about Skeens is you just heard about him so much because he was so dominant throughout the year, right? And so Merrill had a great season, not to say that he didn't, and he probably, was right there in the votes when you look at the numbers afterwards. But Paul Skeens had a great year, so congratulations to him.
And I think in another year when you didn't have those two guys and a guy named Jackson Churio also who had a great year second half from Milwaukee, Mason Wynn would have probably got more support. But the Rookie of the Year vote, unlike the other votes, you only vote for 3 players on that ballot. Wynn didn't get a vote for any first, second, or third.
Yeah, and when you're comparing him to those 3, it's kind of hard to say that he should, right? Because you could argue that all 3 of them had better seasons. And I would really like to see this award expanded to a Rookie of the Year pitcher and a Rookie of the Year offensive player, because they're 2 different things, right? And so how do you compare someone that like Paul Skeens that had a great year to Mason Wynn or Jackson Churio or Jackson Merrill? Like, how do you do that, right? And it's not really fair because you have an MVP and you have Cy Young. Why can't you do it for Rookie of the Year?
People are also talking about how you should split off the Cy Young and have a Reliever of the Year award so you wouldn't have relief pitchers getting Cy Young votes.
And that's true too.
And the other, of course, possibility, I'm glad it didn't happen this year too, is that you have a case sometimes where a player comes over from Japan or Korea who has 5, 6, 7 years of professional experience. Technically, they're a rookie in Major League Baseball, so they're eligible to win Rookie of the Year. Otani did it, some of the other guys. So luckily, I think Imanaga might have had a better shot at it had he not missed so much time for injury. But that obviously opened the door for Skeens and for Merrill.
Of course, for sure.
Chris Sale, the Atlanta Braves, the NL Cy Young Award winner. I have to commit from my position with the Baseball Writers Association of America, I had one of the St. Louis Cy Young votes, and I did vote for Sale and Wheeler second. Also voted for Ryan Helsley fifth. Again, he's the other guy that normally in Cy Young voting you don't look at relief pitchers, and I really don't consider it a homer pick because I think he probably deserved that spot. It took Paul Skeens off my ballot. Wasn't able to have room for him after I voted for Cease for third and Imanaga for fourth. But I think Helsley deserved that recognition for the season that he had.
And absolutely. And you look at the season as a closer, and it was one of the more dominant seasons we've seen in a long time, right? You haven't seen something like that. He set the Cardinals single season save record, and if he stays here for a while, he may set the all-time saves record for the Cardinals. But he's going to have to be here a while to do that. But
one of the questions that will be answered between now and February.
It will be, for sure. But as we round out the awards, you could probably go ahead and safely write off that Aaron Judge is your MVP for the American League and Shohei Otani is your MVP for the National League.
And I would be shocked if neither one of those is a unanimous selection.
So we don't know that answer, but
correct. That's
you can probably go ahead and
Thursday evening after we record this podcast. But yeah, I think we know who those 2 guys are going to be. And I also don't think you're going to get a whole lot of Cardinals getting any MVP.
I would not think so. I also didn't think that our manager was going to get a third.
No, that would surprise me a little bit. Keith Law of The Athletic had one of the votes for the manager of the year, and again, that's a 3-person race. Pat Murphy, your former boss at the Arizona State baseball team when you were his bat boy, won that award. Mike Schild, of course, former Cardinal manager, finished second. I would have been happy with either one of those guys. I thought they both deserved it, but not surprised that Murphy won. But Ollie got a 3rd place vote from Keith Law.
And it's a little surprising based on the fact that I think if anyone watched this team, you could safely say this team underperformed for the ability they had on this team. And I would think a lot of that lies on the manager to get his players to perform to the ability that they can. And it didn't happen. So it was a little surprising to me.
So not surprising is the fact that we're going to spend part of this podcast talking about a subject that we've talked about already through the winter so far. And I think it's going to be a topic that we're going to be covering until something is resolved one way or the other. And that's where Nolan Arenado sits in this whole reset assignment. Derek Gould reported the story in the Post-Dispatch on Thursday that the Cardinals, according to his sources, have had some conversations with teams about possibly trading interest in Arenado. I don't think, as I say, anything's really going to happen until you see the results of some of the major free agent things, because the clubs that the Cardinals are probably talking to as far as having a possibility of trading for Arenado are probably the same clubs that are in those hunt for some major free agents, because you could probably count on, one hand or slightly one hand plus a couple of fingers, the number of clubs that you probably realistically have a chance to trade Arenado to. Clubs that have a chance to win, clubs that need a third baseman, clubs that be able to afford the salary, clubs that Arenado would agree to go to, clubs that have prospects that they will be willing to trade. So that's where it sits.
And I think the biggest question mark around trading Arenado becomes the salary. Are the Cardinals eating the salary? Are they trying to get another team to pick up the salary? And that also determines where he could go, right? Because only certain teams can afford him to pay him if they're trying to dump the salary. If they're willing to eat the salary, you're probably picking up a few extra better players by doing that. But to me, the question mark becomes, and no one can see this. You can run the analytics and you can run the numbers and try to figure it out, but which Arenado is going to be here next year? If it's the Arenado that is capable of what we've seen in the past, 8-time platinum glove winner, whatever it is, an MVP caliber type player, then he becomes a centerpiece of this lineup. And you put him and Wilson Contreras back to back with their offensive numbers that they're capable of. Right. And that's a big spark in this lineup with the young kids that are here. But if he's going to play like he did last year, he's better off somewhere else.
And I think the other part of it is twofold. One is you don't know how good this club is going to be in 2025, because it also depends on the other moves that they make. If this is not a contending club, if they're a 500 club, slightly below 500 club, and no matter how Arenado is playing, if he's on this club, is that a positive or is that a negative? And in the one sense is, who would he be taking playing time from? If your goal in this reset is to get younger, to find out about some of these younger players, the player that Arenado probably would be blocking right now, if you put it on paper, is Thomas Saggese. And I think I'd rather have Saggese playing either second or third, depending on what spot that opens up, than Arenado right now.
And I may be in the minority when I say this, but honestly, right now, I think the guy that he's taking playing spot from is Nolan Gorman. Because Nolan Gorman, we gave him every chance that he could last year to figure it out, and he just couldn't cut down on the strikeouts. And if Thomas Saggese can get on base, sure, you lose some of the power numbers that Gorman had there for you, but if Saggese can get on base, that's almost more important for me right now. And defensively, they're probably similar type players, so you're not really losing much there. You're just losing a little bit in the home run aspect. But it's one of those two guys, in my opinion, that Arenado's blocking.
And the other thing is if he's on this club and the club is not winning, what's his attitude? Wilson Contreras came out and said, I want to be here. I understand that the reset's going on. I'm willing to move to first base, make the club better. I understand from some of the media reports that Sonny Gray has indicated that he would like to stay as well. We don't know what the status of Miles Michaelis is. He's the other player with a no trade clause in his contract. But to me, as important as whether Arenado is playing well or not is what his attitude would be if he is here and this club is not winning.
And I think
I don't know the answer to that.
And that's a big question mark, right? But when the word reset is said, it makes you, kind of question it if guys like Arenado stays, because to me, that's not really a reset. You're maybe moving a few things around, but if you can get a healthy Wilson Contreras for the entire year and you can get a healthy, good playing Nolan Arenado, I think we would both take that, because that's going to be a big key to this offense. And everybody else is going to rally around that.
One of the telling things, I do think at some point during the general managers meetings a few weeks ago, John Mozeliak made a comment, and paraphrasing it, it's not word for word, something about this club is not going to probably look all that different next year than it was this year. And that, to me, goes against the whole reset, format. I mean, okay, you're going to bring in a few younger players, but if we said last week on the show that you've named the 5 starting pitchers right now, they're all the same as last year. And if Contreras playing first, okay, Paul Goldschmidt's gone. But is that really considered a giant reset just because you replace one player?
No. And I think when they said that at the time, none of this, FanDuel Sports Network deal was set. The sports betting vote hadn't passed. And so I think they really needed to cut some money. Well, they've cut $50 million and signed that TV contract. So maybe that was all they needed to do. I honestly think the bigger question is going to be your starting pitching. Because can you afford to have Miles Mikolas in his 13 ERA again at the end of the season? I mean, every time you went out there, he's given up 5 and 6 runs, and it doesn't matter who's playing third base if you're giving up 5 and 6 runs a game. So the question you got to figure out is Miles Mikolas a piece of this team, and can he contribute? And Steven Matz, is he an everyday starter for this club, and how do you see him fitting in there? And Andre Palante. Those three you got to figure out, where do they fit in this deal? Because you got, if Sonny Gray stays and Eric Fetty stays, you got 2 solid guys that are going to be there. Mm-hmm. But I think what you're severely missing is a guy like Kyle Gibson that gave you innings. He did not go on the injured list. He, I don't know that he missed any starts throughout the year, maybe one here and there, but for the most part, he gave you innings. And for a club that needs help, innings are important for starting pitching.
That's Mike Raines. Rob Raines here with you on the STL Sports Page Raines on the Cardinals podcast. And I think, the other interesting thing about that is, as you talk about Arenado potentially blocking a player like Sajacy, if you have those other veteran starting pitchers, and they've talked about, okay, we want to give Michael McGreevy a chance based on the way that he pitched, a couple times he got the chance. You still have Gordon Graceffo there. You mentioned Tim Kanc's getting added to the 40-man roster, even though he still hasn't pitched at AAA. Dakota Roby, had an injury-plagued season in 2024, so you probably can't count on him to start the season in 2025. But where are those guys' opportunities going to come to get a chance to pitch if all those other guys are still here?
And I don't understand Michael McGreevy and why he hasn't gotten a better shot up here, because when he did pitch up here last year, he pitched great. He did everything that was expected of him, and it didn't seem to matter. Palante goes in there, does everything that's expected of him, and he gets a start every time and keeps rolling. So I don't understand what McGreevy did differently. And I would have started him over Miles Mikolas last year at any point in time, because Mikolas just didn't have it. And so maybe that's the reset. Maybe it's you keep Fetty and Gray, and the rest of your starting rotation is some of these young guys.
And that only depends, again, kind of like the Arenado contract with Mikolas and Matz. Are you willing to eat part of that contract to make a trade? Or, will you be able to take somebody will say, I'll take on the contract, but I'm not going to give you anything better than a mid-level prospect. So, John Mozeliak entering his final season as president of baseball operations, does not have an easy assignment this winter. I mean, there's a lot of tough decisions they're going to have to make about they look forward to how this roster is going to be structured when we get to Jupiter in February in 2025.
And what does John Mozeliak want his tenure at the Cardinals to look like as he comes to an end? His last few seasons have not been anything that he wants it to be. And does he want to try to go out on top as he leaves? And if he does, he's got to make some bold moves here. But I think you got Chaim and you got Bill basically saying, well, you can't sell the farm because we need to work for the long term. So it's going to be very interesting to see kind of what happens here.
And as we mentioned too, I mean, even if they do have some more clarity now on the television broadcasting situation, it's still, the payroll for the club payroll for 2025 is going to be lower than it was in 2024, because I don't think you can count on selling quite as many tickets. If the team plays better, then people will come back. I don't think there's any question about that. But I think that there's going to be some hesitation at the start of the season about what that attendance base is going to look like. And we do know that even with the clarity to the TV contract, it is still less money than they were originally supposed to get under the old agreement with Bowie Sports. So I think you can count on that, which again leads you to say, okay, then that means we should have younger players. But the problem is, as they set the roster for 2025, John Mozeliak has also gone on record saying that any move that they make that affects the season beyond 2025, Chaim Bloom is going to be involved with, which I think is a good thing as they go forward to see, okay, how are we going to structure this club not only for 2025, but what's it going to look like in 2026 and 2027?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, when you look at the structure of this club and fans coming out to the game, a lot of that depends on the guys that are here. Is Miles Mikolas, Steven Matz, and Andre Palante going to sell a lot of tickets? Probably not, based on the experience from last year. But if they find a way to trade some of these guys and try some new blood in here, maybe that works out for them, right? I think that Miles Michaelis becomes a guy that, do you pair him with a guy like Luken Baker? Because Luken probably doesn't have a spot on this team with Wilson moving to first now and Alec Burleson having the ability to play more spots. Can you package guys together like Luken and Michaelis to get something back for him?
Well, it'll be interesting to find out again with Thanksgiving week coming up. That's generally a quiet week in baseball, not only for the Cardinals, but around Major League Baseball. Could be some news, but by and large, it'll be now another couple of weeks before we really start maybe to get some answers to some of these questions. And then we're right on the edge of the winter meetings coming up in Dallas later on after the first week of December. So that's when you'll probably start to see some news happening as well. So appreciate the visit. We'll, of course, keep you posted with all of the Cardinal news as it happens here on STLSportsPage.com. We'll be back with another edition of Reigns on the Cardinals podcast soon here on STLSportsPage.com.